with your family around the table, the lights warm and familiar, the smell of roasted food pulling you back into a time before you could name what you felt. Everyone is smiling, or at least trying to. The holiday ritual unfolds the same seats, the same jokes, the same uneasy silences. Yet, beneath the ornaments, beneath the laughter, something else always arrives with you. You did not invite it, and yet it knows the way. It is there in the sharpness of a comment that cuts deeper than it should. It is there in the irritation you feel when your brother interrupts you. It is there in the defensiveness in your mother's tone. The sudden heaviness in your chest is the old wound you thought you outgrew, but find resurrected as though time itself is circular. This, my friends, is the shadow. It does not knock at the door because it belongs to the house. It comes to every feast because where the family gathers, the unconscious awakens what you call irritation, conflict, tension. I call a visitation from the shadow. You may believe you are arguing about politics, about careers, about who brings the better dessert, but beneath the surface, you are reliving the ancient patterns of your psychic inheritance. The shadow does not only belong to you personally, it is archetypal. It is older than you, older than your parents, older even than the traditions you observe. It is the unintegrated life of your soul, the unresolved conflict between what you show and what you hide. In daily life, you may suppress it. You may distract yourself with work or with pleasure. But when you return to the table of your origins, when you sit among those who shaped your first images of love and rejection, the shadow is summoned like a spirit. It thrives where the mask of politeness is thinnest, where memory collides with presence. Imagine this shadow as the uninvited guest sitting beside you, feeding on every unspoken resentment, growing strong on the wine of silence. Perhaps your father says something with a tone that humiliates you, and you clench your teeth because you are an adult now, and you will not give him the satisfaction of knowing he still wounds you. But in that very gesture of restraint, in the suppressed anger, you see it. The shadow flickers in your eyes. You think it is your father's fault or your aunt's cruelty, but what you face is the figure you have carried inside, the part of you that has not yet been made conscious. Family does not merely bring you home. It brings you back to the crucible where your shadow was forged. This is why the holiday table is not only a place of celebration, but also of revelation. In the rituals of reunion, your unconscious is revealed through the smallest details. The sound of a sibling's laughter can trigger jealousy that is not about the present moment, but about childhood rivalry that never died. The way your mother favors another over you exposes the archetypal wound of being unseen. You may think you have left such things behind, but they are not behind. They are within. The shadow does not dissolve with distance. It hides until the right constellation of people and symbols awakens it. You must understand, the shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply the unclaimed portion of your psyche. It is the sum of what you have disowned to appear lovable, acceptable, righteous. Every culture teaches children what is allowed and what is forbidden, what is praised and what is shamed. And so a child learns to push anger envy, sexuality, vulnerability into the basement of the psyche. But the basement has no lock. When you walk again into the house of your family, the walls become porous, and the basement door swings open. What spills out may feel dangerous, but it is also the gateway to wholeness, for without the shadow, there is no self. Without a descent into darkness, there is no ascent into light. Consider how myths describe feasts. In many traditions, the banquet is not only a celebration, but a trial. At the banquet, betrayals occur, truths are revealed, kingdoms fall. In the Nordic sagas, in the Greek tales, the feast is never just food. It is the moment when the hidden reveals itself. Why? Because when humans gather to affirm life, they unconsciously summon what has been excluded. When the community says, "We are together," the shadow whispers, "But here is what you have left out." This is why laughter so easily turns to tears, why joy teeters on the edge of quarrel. The archetype demands balance. What is denied must return. At your holiday dinner, you are not only eating with your family, you are eating with the archetypes. Your father may embody the stern king who demands respect but cannot give affection. Your mother may embody the wounded queen who nurtures but manipulates. Your brother may carry the trickster, mocking to conceal his own fear of being small. And perhaps you carry the exile, the scapegoat, the one who must hold all the unspoken truths. These are not mere roles of psychology. They are eternal figures within the human story. They appear in myths because they appear in your living room. The shadow shows itself through them, but here is the deeper mystery. The shadow that disturbs you in others is your own. The irritation you feel at your brother's arrogance reveals the arrogance you repress in yourself. The pity you feel for your mother may conceal your own fear of being powerless. Projection is a mechanism by which the shadow appears. You do not see it as your own, so you paint it on the canvas of your family. The holiday dinner becomes a hall of mirrors. You believe you are fighting with them, but you are fighting with yourself. This is the alchemy of the psyche. What is unconscious must become visible, and visibility comes through conflict, through tension, through repetition. Do not despise this repetition. It is not meaningless. The same argument that erupts every year is not proof of failure, but proof of persistence. The psyche is relentless in bringing you back to the unresolved. Just as a dream repeats a theme until you understand it, so too does life repeat its symbolic patterns until you see. Your family gathering is a living dream. Each person plays a role in the drama of your individuation. The one who triggers you most is your teacher, for they carry the projection of your shadow most vividly. Imagine you are at the table and your uncle makes a cruel joke at your expense. You feel shame rise like fire. In that moment, you have two choices. You can react and reinforce the old cycle, or you can pause and ask, what part of me is this revealing? Perhaps it is the part of you that fears ridicule, the child who was laughed at, the performer who longs for applause but trembles at rejection. That child is still within you, hidden, waiting for recognition. When your uncle speaks, he is the archetypal trickster, summoning the wounded child. If you can see this, then the shadow becomes less terrifying. It becomes a guide. The holiday dinner is thus not a social event, but a ritual initiation. It is an annual opportunity to meet the shadow in its most embodied form. This is why you feel exhausted afterward, why you leave with both warmth and heaviness. You have been in the presence of your unconscious. The shadow has danced across the table, and whether you acknowledged it or not, you have been transformed. The question is not whether the shadow will appear. It always appears. The question is whether you will recognize it as your own. If you close your eyes for a moment, you might recall the recurring dream of the house with many rooms. In one dream, you discover a basement you did not know existed. In another, you find a hidden attic full of strange objects. This dream of the house is universal because the house is the psyche, the basement is the shadow, and who waits for you in that basement, not a stranger, but yourself, the parts of you that you have banished. When you walk into your family home, you are walking into this dream. You think you are stepping into the house of your parents, but you are stepping into the architecture of your unconscious. Every familiar corridor, every voice echoing from the past is a symbolic passage. And here's the paradox. The very place where you feel most irritated, most triggered, most bound by old dynamics is also the place where your transformation is nearest. Because only where you are most vulnerable can the unconscious break through. Only where the shadow is most alive can you integrate it. To flee from this is to remain divided. To endure it consciously is to become whole. This is why I tell you, do not resent the shadow that shows up at every holiday dinner. It is not your enemy. It is your invitation. The invitation to descend into the hidden chambers of your soul, to see what you have avoided, to reclaim what you have projected. Your family, in all their imperfections, are the mirrors given to you by life to reveal what you cannot see alone. They are not obstacles to your individuation. They are its agents. The shadow uses them to call you deeper. So the next time you sit at that table, notice the moment your chest tightens, your voice sharpens, your patience snaps. In that instant, pause. Ask not, why are they like this, but why does this live in me? Ask, what part of me trembles here? And why does it need to be seen? Then you will find that the uninvited guest, the shadow, is not here to destroy your feast, but to complete it. For without the shadow, there is no wholeness, and without wholeness, no true celebration of life. The shadow does not appear in abstract symbols alone. It arrives clothed in gestures, in the subtle tone of a voice, in the way your sister rolls her eyes when you speak. To dismiss these as trivial irritations is to miss the profound message that the psyche is delivering. For every flicker of discomfort is a thread that leads into the labyrinth of your unconscious. When you tug at it, you discover not only your own story, but the story of humanity itself. For the archetypes that shape you are the same, that shape the myths, the same that wove the dreams of your ancestors. Think of the dream where you walk into a room full of strangers, and suddenly they all turn to look at you. You feel the crushing weight of exposure, the terror of being judged. That dream is not about strangers. It is about your family dinner. about the archetypal fear of rejection by the tribe, for in our earliest evolution, to be cast out was to die. So when your aunt criticizes your choices, you feel more than irritation. You feel the survival instinct itself. The shadow awakens the ancient fear because within it lies the unintegrated memory of abandonment. Do you not see how extraordinary this is? What seems like a simple quarrel over who carves the turkey is in truth a reenactment of the primal drama of belonging. Every family gathering is a theater where the myths of humanity are replayed in miniature. You laugh at your father's stubbornness, but he is the patriarchal God, immovable, demanding reverence. You cringe at your mother's worry, but she is the great mother archetype, both nourishing and devouring. And you yourself, when you retreat into silence, when you seize with resentment, you are enacting the role of the forgotten child, the exile who carries the wound of invisibility. The shadow ensures that these roles never vanish, for they are inscribed into the collective unconscious. Now, many of you imagine the shadow as something dark, monstrous, grotesque. But the shadow is not only the ugly, it is also the beautiful that you have disowned. When your sister's success fills you with envy, the shadow is not merely your jealousy, it is also your own unlived potential. Her brilliance mirrors the light within you that you have denied. To confront the shadow, therefore, is not to confront only demons, but also angels. It is to acknowledge the totality of what you are. And in this lies the unbearable weight of self-realization. This is why, at the holiday table, you may find yourself unexpectedly moved to tears by something small. A cousin's laugh may remind you of your own lost innocence. A song sung after dinner may awaken in you a longing for beauty you abandoned in your adulthood. These two are visitations of the shadow, for what you hide is not only rage, but also joy. The family, in all its imperfection, holds the key to both. But I must tell you, confrontation with the shadow is never comfortable. It strips away the persona, the mask you have carefully crafted. You may arrive at the dinner as the successful professional, the wise counselor, the strong provider, but the moment you sit down, someone says something that pierces the mask, and you are 12 years old again, powerless and exposed. The shadow delights in this unmasking. It reminds you that your persona is not your essence. You are not merely the role you play in the world. You are also the child you abandoned, the emotions you silenced, the desires you feared. At the holiday dinner, the shadow rips open the seams of your identity, and though it feels humiliating, it is in truth sacred, for the self can only emerge when the false masks are broken. Consider the dream of the feast that turns into chaos. At first, the table is set with abundance, the candles glow, the guests are joyous, but then, one by one, the plates rot, the food turns to ash, the wine to blood, panic spreads, voices rise. The dreamer awakens in horror. This dream, too, is archetypal. It tells us that abundance without integration becomes decay. The family feast, If it ignores, the shadow will always collapse into quarrel. The unconscious will not be excluded. What is not welcomed as guest will return as invader. So I urge you, do not exile the shadow from your dinner. Invite it, speak what has long been silent, but speak it with awareness. If you feel anger, recognize it not as a weapon, but as a messenger. If you feel jealousy, see it not as sin, but as signal of unlived life. If you feel shame, do not bury it, hold it to the light, and ask, what part of me is asking to be healed? In this way, the holiday table becomes not a battlefield, but an altar. The meal is transformed into communion, not only with your family, but with your own soul. And yet, I know this is not easy. To face the shadow requires courage of a rare kind. It is easier to blame, to gossip afterward, to escape into distraction. But every year, the cycle repeats because the psyche does not relent. It is like the dream that insists on being dreamed until you understand life itself conspires to bring you to wholeness, and it will use your family, your holiday dinners, your most intimate relationships to do so, for the self, that inner wholeness, which is the goal of individuation, does not care for your comfort. It cares only for your completion. You may ask me, but why must it be so painful? Why can we not grow in joy, in harmony, I answer. Because consciousness is born from tension. The opposites must clash for a spark to ignite. You cannot know your strength unless you have faced your weakness. You cannot claim your light unless you have walked through your darkness. The shadow provides this friction. It is the whetstone against which your soul is sharpened. Without it, you would remain dull, half-formed, a creature of surface, without depth. Therefore, do not curse the quarrel at the table. See it as ritual combat, as initiation into greater awareness. Every harsh word, every uncomfortable silence is a fire through which you are purified. The shadow that arrives each year is not mocking you, it is forging you. And one day, if you enter, you will see that what you hated most in those moments was the very door through which your soul entered its fullness. Now, let us turn to the collective aspect. For the shadow is not only personal, but also communal. A family does not simply consist of individuals. It has its own unconscious. Just as you repress aspects of yourself, so too does the family repress truth it cannot bear. Perhaps there is a secret never spoken of an ancestor's crime, a mother's sacrifice, a betrayal, a loss. These unspoken truths live on, haunting the table. You feel them in the silence that falls when a certain subject arises. You feel them in the way laughter suddenly becomes forced. The family shadow is alive, and it too insists on recognition. The holiday dinner then is also the theater of the family shadow. Patterns repeat across generations, the same quarrels, the same alliances, the same scapegoats. A son becomes his father, a daughter her mother, not because they choose to, but because the archetype demands it, until consciousness breaks the cycle When you see your own anger mirrored in your father's face, when you hear your mother's anxiety echo in your own voice, you are witnessing the inheritance of the shadow. This is not fate, but it feels like fate until you awaken. Dreams often show us this inheritance. A man dreams of standing in a courtroom where his grandfather is being tried, and suddenly he realizes he himself is both the accused and the judge. This is the truth. You inherit not only the gifts of your ancestors, but also their unfinished battles. At the holiday table, you are not only speaking with your living relatives, you are speaking with the dead. Their unresolved shadows linger, waiting for someone to bear them into consciousness. If you feel an inexplicable heaviness at the table, a sorrow that seems larger than your own, it may be the grief of generations flowing through you. To face it is to free not only yourself, but your lineage. This is the sacred task of individuation, to redeem the unintegrated past, to bring light into the ancestral darkness. Every holiday dinner is an opportunity to do this work, not by lecturing your family, not by breaking the table in anger, but by carrying awareness into the moment. When you refuse to project blindly, when you pause to reflect rather than react, you shift the entire field. The shadow loses its power when seen. What was poison becomes medicine. What was curse becomes blessing. Do you not see how even in conflict, grace is present? For the shadow that troubles you is also the shadow that heals you. The very uncle who mocks you is the one who reveals your deepest wound, and thus your path to healing. The very sibling who outshines you forces you to reclaim your own light. The family, with all its flaws, is your laboratory of wholeness. Without it, you would remain blind. With it, you are given the mirror in which to see yourself clearly. And so I tell you this year, when you sit at the table, do not only eat the food, eat the shadow, taste its bitterness, swallow its fire, digest its lessons, for only then will you rise from the table nourished, not just in body but in soul. The holiday dinner is your alchemical vessel, your crucible of transformation. Within it lies not only the memory of childhood, but the promise of your individuation. The shadow comes because it loves you enough to demand your wholeness. When you dream of sitting at a table with unfamiliar faces, and you feel that strange sense of déjà vu, it is because the psyche knows that the table is eternal. The banquet is not only your family's, it is the archetypal table where ancestors and descendants meet, where gods and mortals exchange masks, where the unconscious lays out its feast. The food is not merely food, it is symbol. Bread is the body, wine is blood. Meat is the struggle of survival. To eat together is to enter a sacred contract. But the shadow always slips into that contract, whispering that something has been left out. Why does the dream so often turn the feast into chaos? Because the unconscious insists on truth. Where you pretend, it unmasks. Where you repress, it reveals. The dream turns the turkey to ashes, the wine to poison, not to torment you, but to expose the falseness of appearances. And so too in life, when the holiday dinner turns sour, when laughter becomes quarrel, when you leave in tears, It is not proof of failure, but of the psyche insisting on wholeness. The shadow says you cannot feast only on sweetness. You must also taste the bitter, the unspoken, the hidden. At times, you may feel you carry the shadow not only of yourself, but of the entire family. Perhaps you are the one who feels the heaviness, who absorbs the unspoken tensions, who notices what others deny. This role is archetypal. It is the scapegoat, the vessel into which the family unconsciously pours what it cannot hold. You may resent it, but it is also a sacred calling, for by bearing the shadow, you bring the possibility of transformation. The scapegoat becomes the healer. The rejected stone becomes the cornerstone. But only if you do not drown in projection, only if you recognize this is not only theirs, it is also mine. And by integrating mine, I free us all. Let me tell you of a woman's dream. She dreamt she was back at her grandmother's house, preparing the holiday table, but when she opened the cupboard, instead of plates, she found bones. She set them on the table anyway, and when the family gathered, no one noticed that they ate from skulls and ribs. She awoke in terror, but what does this dream mean? It means the family feast was haunted by the dead, by the unacknowledged griefs, the silenced tragedies. The bones were the unspoken stories. She alone saw them, for she was the one chosen by the unconscious to witness in her waking life. She felt the heaviness at every family gathering, but never knew why. The dream revealed it. She was dining with the ancestral shadow. Such dreams remind us that the shadow is not bound by your personal biography. It extends backwards, carrying the weight of generations. Trauma is inherited. Secrets flow through blood. Archetypes echo through time. At your holiday table sit not only your parents and siblings, but also the ghosts of your lineage. Their wounds press through the silence, waiting for recognition. If you feel that strange melancholy at Christmas, that inexplicable anger at New Year's, it may not be yours alone. It may be the unresolved shadow of your ancestors asking for light. And here lies the mystical dimension when you face your shadow at the family feast. You are not only healing yourself, you are healing the line. You are the one who dares to see what was denied, to name what was silenced, to integrate what was broken. Your individuation is not a selfish act. It is a service to the collective. By becoming whole, you redeem what was fragmented. The shadow appears not to shame you, but to entrust you with this work. But what then of love? For does not the holiday dinner pretend to be about love, about togetherness? Yes, but true love is not sentimentality. True love is the capacity to hold the other as they are, shadow and all. If you can look at your father's harshness and say, this too is human. If you can look at your sister's envy and see, this is her wound. If you can look at your own rage and whisper, this is also me, then you have touched love in its deepest form. Love that does not exclude, love that integrates, love that is not blind but clear-eyed. The shadow teaches this love. Without the shadow, love is fantasy. With the shadow, love is truth. Notice also how children behave at these dinners. A child may throw a tantrum, may speak the blunt truth that adults dare not utter. This is no accident. Children are often the vessels through which the family shadow erupts. They mirror what adults conceal. Their outbursts are not meaningless, they are revelations. If a child cries uncontrollably at the table, ask yourself, what grief is unspoken in this family? If a child refuses to eat, ask what truth is being refused. The unconscious uses the innocent to speak its language. To ignore them is to ignore the oracle. Now, let us turn inward. What is it in you that recoils at the shadow? It is the ego, fragile, terrified of dissolution. The ego wishes the holiday to be simple, harmonious, controlled, but the self, the totality of your being, knows that harmony without truth is hollow. The ego fears the shadow because it sees only disruption. The self embraces the shadow because it sees completion. Individuation is the journey from ego sphere to self's embrace. And the holiday table, strange as it sounds, is one of the classrooms where this journey is taught. Imagine for a moment that you could approach the dinner as a dream. Instead of reacting automatically, you could observe symbolically. You could see your mother, not merely as your mother, but as the archetypal mother carrying the paradox of nurture and control. You could see your father as the king, both authority and tyranny. You could see yourself as the hero struggling between rebellion and belonging. Suddenly, the quarrels become myth. You're not merely arguing about politics, you are reenacting the eternal drama of individuation. To view it this way is to awaken in the dream, to lucidly engage with the shadow instead of being devoured by it. But beware, to engage does not mean to moralize. Many fall into the trap of trying to fix the family, to enlighten others, to play the role of savior at the table. This, too, is ego. The true task is inner. It is not to change your father, but to integrate the father within you, not to silence your sister, but to claim the sister within, not to purge the shadow, but to hold it. When you do this, you shift the entire atmosphere, not by force, but by presence. For the unconscious responds not to words, but to energy. Have you not noticed how one calm presence can soften a tense room? How one act of awareness can diffuse a conflict? This is the alchemical effect of integration. When you hold your shadow consciously, you no longer project it onto others. You withdraw your poison, and in doing so, you cleanse the field. This is the silent miracle of individuation. It does not shout, it emanates. And yet, even in your progress, the shadow will return. Do not think that integration means elimination. The shadow is eternal. It is the companion of consciousness. Every step you take into the light creates a new shadow behind you. To be human is to walk with this paradox. The holiday dinner will always have its tensions, because life itself is tension. The goal is not to abolish conflict, but to meet it differently, to hold it with awareness rather than fear. So when you feel the familiar sting this year, when the old wound throbs again, do not despair. Smile inwardly. For you are being invited once more to deepen. The shadow is faithful. It never forgets you. It will always meet you at the table. And one day, you will look across that table and see not only your family, but yourself reflected in every face, your anger, your joy, your wounds, your gifts. Then you will know the shadow was never your enemy. It was your mirror, your guide, your most honest companion. There comes a moment, if you are attentive, when the table ceases to be merely a table and the faces around you begin to blur into something larger than themselves. You see your father, not as father, but as the archetypal father, carrying the weight of authority, the gift of structure, the wound of distance. You see your mother not as a woman with flaws, but as the mother archetype, offering both nourishment and entanglement, blessing and burden. You see your siblings as mirrors of your own inner fragments. The ambitious one you have disowned, the fearful one you have denied, the joyful one you have silenced. Suddenly, you realize that you are not dining with people, but with your own psyche, externalized, embodied, dramatized. This is the mystical truth of the shadow. At the feast, it gathers all the lost parts of you and seats them across from you, so that you can no longer look away. Do not misunderstand me. This is not mere metaphor. The psyche arranges reality in such a way that what is within is reflected without. The holiday dinner becomes a mandala, a circle of wholeness, where every figure plays a role in your individuation, even the one you cannot stand, even the one who wounds you most, is an essential piece of the design. The shadow is not chaos. It is hidden order, and if you can hold your gaze steady, if you can resist the impulse to flee into resentment or defensiveness, you may glimpse the self shining through the disorder, the secret wholeness behind the quarrel. Many of you carry the fantasy that one day the holiday dinner will be perfect, no fights, no tension, only harmony. But perfection is not wholeness. Wholeness is the union of opposites. Wholeness is laughter and tears, joy and anger, closeness and distance. To expect only light is to remain a child. To embrace both light and shadow is to grow into the fullness of your humanity. The quarrels that return each year are not signs of failure. They are initiations. They are the friction that polishes the soul. They are the dreams that repeat until you awaken. And when you awaken, something shifts. You no longer seek to win arguments, to prove yourself, to defend your persona. You begin instead to listen, not with your ears alone, but with your soul. You hear your father's harshness, and beneath it, the trembling of his own unhealed boy. You hear your mother's worry, and beneath it, the echo of her own abandonment. You hear your siblings' mocking laughter, and beneath it, the cry of their own longing for recognition. In that moment, compassion arises, not sentimental compassion that excuses everything, but fierce compassion that sees truth and still chooses to embrace. The shadow has fulfilled its purpose. It has taught you to love with eyes open. Remember the dream of the house with many rooms. At first, you live only in the bright rooms, the ones filled with sunlight and approval, but slowly, through dreams, through conflict, through holiday dinners, you discover hidden doors. Some lead to basements filled with rage, some to attics filled with sorrow, some to gardens filled with forgotten beauty. One by one, you enter them, trembling but willing, and as you do, the house expands. You realize that your psyche is larger than you ever imagined. The shadow does not shrink the house, it reveals its vastness, and one day you stand in the center, no longer afraid of any room, for you know that the entire house belongs to you. This is individuation, this is the self. So when the shadow sits beside you this holiday, do not curse it. Offer it a seat, pour it a glass of wine, ask it what it has come to teach you. For every year it returns, not to punish, but to remind you of your wholeness. The quarrels, the irritations, the tears, these are not intrusions. They are invitations. They are the psyche knocking at the door of your consciousness, saying, you are more than this mask. You are larger than this wound. You are whole, if only you will claim it. And if you have the courage to claim it, the feast is transformed. The turkey remains. The wine remains. The wine, but they shine with new meaning. The table becomes an altar. The family becomes a circle of archetypes. The shadow becomes the sacred guest. You are no longer merely eating. You are partaking in the eternal mystery of the psyche, the communion of the self. In this way, the holiday dinner becomes both ordinary and divine. Ordinary, because it is still filled with laughter, with quarrels, with too much food and too little patience. Divine, because in its very ordinariness, it reveals the eternal drama of the soul. You do not need to travel to distant temples or climb mountains to find the sacred. It is here, in the living room, in the kitchen, in the awkward silence after someone says too much. The shadow shows up because the sacred shows up. They arrive together, hand in hand, whispering, this too is your path. So I leave you with this. The next time you gather, when you feel the old wound rising, when you are tempted to escape into bitterness or distraction, pause, breathe, see the face across from you, not only as father or mother, brother or sister, but as mirror of your own unconscious, and see the shadow not as enemy but as guide. For if you can do this, then every quarrel becomes initiation. Every irritation becomes revelation. Every holiday dinner becomes a step toward wholeness. The shadow will always be there, but so will you. And in the dance between the two, the self is born